Next, I'm going to show you how to approach doing a drawing specifically to be used for a painting. You're going to need a pencil, a ruler, and a piece of tracing paper, cut exactly to the same size as your photograph. I can't stress that enough, guys. It has to be the exact same size or this won't work. Doing a drawing for a painting has a very different set of requirements than an ordinary drawing, so even if you're a talented draftsman, I strongly suggest you follow along with this exercise. I've chosen to teach it to you using the grid system because I'm sure some of you will need a little extra help getting the drawing right, and because this is going to be a very different approach than most of you are used to. So using a grid will ensure that your drawing will be as accurate as possible. As you can see, I've already begun by measuring and making a mark every ½ inch across the left-hand side of the photograph. Now we'll do the exact same thing across the right-hand side, every ½ inch. Do your best to be as precise as possible with your measurements. Now just use a straight edge or ruler to connect the dots. Again, you should be working with a regular photograph. I spray mounted my printout to a piece of foam core to keep it rigid so that it doesn't move around while I shoot this video. The grid system is great for those of you who don't have a talent for drawing. In my opinion, drawing and painting are two very different skill sets. I've known painters that are terrible at drawing, and vice versa. You don't need to be able to draw to make a great painting. Chuck Close is a famous example of this. If you're not familiar with Chuck Close, look him up. He's a living artist who used the grid system the same way I'm teaching it to you. But he used it to create huge realistic paintings back in the 1970s. And that's what started off his historical career. Here are a couple of his paintings. Now make dots every ½ inch across the top. And connect them with straight lines using a ruler. Next, I'm going to number each line from bottom to top, starting at 1 and going up to 19. Then I'll do the same across the bottom, starting with 1 and ending with 26. Now, repeat that exact same process on your tracing paper. And just a reminder, it has to be cut to the exact same size as your photograph, or this exercise won't work. Then make your marks every ½ inch, just like on your photograph, and be sure to tape down your tracing paper so it doesn't move around while you're working. Just put a mark every ½ inch. As I mentioned, even if you are skilled at drawing, please follow along with this tutorial. Doing a drawing for a painting is very different from what you're probably used to. It's more like making a map, and I'm going to give you lots of tips and advice along the way. And connect the dots. Now put dots every ½ inch on the left and right hand sides and connect them. And just like on the photo, number the lines from bottom up from 1 to 19. And across the bottom from 1 to 29. Okay, let's start the drawing. As you can see, I've done my best to get as much of both the photograph and the drawing in the shot, but since they're both horizontal images, I had to compromise a little. And again, I taped everything down so it doesn't move around while I work. Begin by only drawing the outline of the pear, plate, and that big drop shadow under the plate. That's it. Don't go into any detail in the interior of the image or do any shading. Just draw in the outline of the entire shape. I'm beginning at 7 lines up and 4 across. I'll just locate that spot on my tracing paper. I'm going to leave myself a guide mark to show me where that is. Now I'll locate where the end of that line is and make myself a guide mark there as well. I'm doing this as a precaution. If you go one square off while you're following the grid, it'll throw the whole image off. This way I'll see that I missed my mark if I make a mistake. Now I'll simply connect those dots, making a line one square at a time. While I work, I'd like to explain why I chose to use tracing paper to do the preliminary drawing. First, it's easy to erase on. It's natural to make mistakes while you work on a drawing, but trying to erase on illustration board or canvas is a nightmare. Second, because the texture of tracing paper is soft, it's easy and inspiring to draw on. Canvas and illustration board are textured, which is great to paint on, but doesn't take pencil line well. And when we're finished, I'm going to show you how to make a sort of carbon copy of your drawing and transfer it directly onto your illustration board. By the way, starting with an outline is how I would recommend approaching a drawing, with or without the grid system. I'm making myself a dot to show me where the plate curves. Now I'm going to follow this line one box at a time until I arrive at the dot. The most common mistake I see people make is to start a drawing by focusing on one part and rendering it before they've even gotten the basic shapes in. It's always the eye. Everybody loves to draw eyes. How do you even know if the rest of the drawing is going to fit on the piece of paper? You need a measuring system. Some people draw boxes to give them ratios, some take measurements. I'm using my pointer finger on the photograph to keep track of which square I'm at. That dot we put down is there to make sure you end up in the right spot. Next, I'll move to the pear. I'm just working my way up one square at a time. I chose this image for the course because the contrast from light to shadow breaks the shapes up nicely, and all the lines are so well defined. For example, this hard line between the light side of the pear and the plate against the dark background really makes the line easy to find. Remember, you should still only be drawing the outline. Getting the shape of the plate right is going to be the hardest part. If that ellipse is off, it can be very noticeable, but take it one square at a time and you can't go wrong. Just do your best to keep the line you draw as clean as possible. Now that you have the outline drawn, any mistake you make going forward will be much more noticeable, and you want mistakes to present themselves sooner than later so you don't spend a lot of time working on something that you'll have to erase. I've begun putting in the interior shapes, but remember, just simple pencil line, no shading. I know it's a little difficult to find the line in this shadow, but do your best. The reason I chose fruit to paint in this class is because if you're a little off on the shape, it'll still look good. Now that you have a basic outline of the pears, you can move inward and start drawing some more interior lines. Next, find this light gray shadow on the inner rim of the plate. Although it's a very light value and has a soft edge, make a hard outline around where it goes and don't shade it in. My objective is to retrain your brain to see this image as shapes that you're going to fill in with flat values later. All of your line weight should be the same, even though this looks lighter in the photograph. Even these subtle little reflections, they may seem almost invisible, but find them and define them with a hard pencil line. This is where things can get confusing. I know your eye is used to seeing light and shadow, but try to think about each shape as solid and outline its borders. Only draw defining lines. Remember, we're trying to make a map of a pear, not draw a sketch of a pear. As I said earlier, even if you're good at drawing, you're going to be learning a very different approach in this class. If you're just learning how to draw, this is a great opportunity to pick up some good habits with training wheels on, so to speak. And once you're comfortable, you can do it without the grid. Just draw in a line for this shadow for now. We can put the information inside the shadow in later. Now you can start putting in the interior information, but still no shading. Like a map, outline the shadows and highlights to indicate where they are. For example, as you can see, I'm outlining the drop shadow the pear on the left leaves on the sliced pear on the right. This big shadow on the side of the pear doesn't have a hard edge, so you're going to have to estimate where the shadow line is and define it. A trick to helping you find that distinction is to draw right onto your photograph. Then you could just repeat that line on your drawing. I know it's a weird shape, but just follow the line down one square at a time and you'll get it. Finally, let's put in this big dark drop shadow under the plate. Now just a few finishing touches. Go back and see if you missed any lines. Looks like I forgot to put in this one around the rim of the plate. Finally, just give yourself an indication of about where this big shadow across the background will go, and you're finished.